In the year 1960, in the Congo, Patrice Lumumba was working so hard to resist foreign control, stop foreign powers from looting his country's resources, and he desired to develop his country, but he was assassinated. In 1966, in Ghana, Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah had worked so hard to create some development. He desired to unite the entire Africa, resist foreign control from looting Africa's resources, and to develop Africa as a whole, but he was overthrown with propaganda. In 1987, in Burkina Faso, Thomas Sankara had resisted foreign control for 4 years, resisted foreign powers from looting his country's resources, and he desired to develop his country, but he was assassinated. In 2011, after Gaddafi had turned Libya from one of the poorest states into one of the richest, he desired to unite the entire Africa and to develop Africa as a whole, but he was also assassinated. You see, my friend, I could go on and on because the stories are countless, but the pattern is very clear. And so the biggest question has always been, why is Africa the richest continent with many nations benefiting greatly from its resources, and yet Africans happen to be the poorest people? A lot of secrets on why and how Africa's development has been savagely suppressed for centuries are coming out to light. And so, in my own opinion, there are 3 major arms that are destroying Africa, and the third one is the most dangerous. Let's take a quick look at all 3. In the year 1884, a group of leaders from certain Western countries met in Berlin, and they would call this the Berlin Conference. They would decide the fate of Africans as they would divide Africa up like a piece of cake and share among themselves. For many years, these Western countries have been using well-structured manipulation and assassination systems to loot Africa's resources and to keep Africans impoverished.
All the economic structures, all the global institutions, and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is. We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them dirt cheap.
Many would think that Africa gained independence from these colonial countries, but don't be fooled. Colonialism was immediately replaced with what Kwame Nkrumah defined as neocolonialism. And this means, in theory, the country is independent, but in reality, its economic and political systems are being controlled from outside. That also means the leader of the African country becomes a puppet to the Western leader. And now, when a strong African leader arises and the West can't make him into a puppet, they create and fund civil wars in his country, label him notorious, and either assassinate him or overthrow him in a coup. About 20 years ago, John Perkins blew the whistle on American Economic Hitmen, or the EHMs, an organization he used to be an active member of.
I was an economic hitman.
These are highly paid specialists who use deceptive financial strategies to influence leaders of developing nations who have rich natural mineral resources. The EHMs persuade these leaders to take loans from the World Bank or the IMF to create projects whose benefit only goes to a few wealthy individuals, leaving the majority poor out from benefiting. The loans are supposed to be too huge that the country cannot pay back, and the leader of the developing country is persuaded to use the country's mineral resources as collateral. The interesting part is, the money never truly goes to the developing country. It is strategized to go back to American corporations, which are supposed to be the only ones to build the project. Since the debt is too huge to be repaid, the Americans claim the natural resources by buying it at extremely cheap prices, and even get the upper hand to build their military bases in the developing country's backyard, as well as controlling the leader in several ways. According to John Perkins, if the EHMs fail to persuade any developing country's leader, then their big brother, that is the CIA, steps in and finishes the job by assassinating the leader. And if the CIA also fails to assassinate the leader, then they create and fund for chaos in the developing country. At this point, the US military steps in with the notion of liberating the country and takes over the country's natural resources. This is really a predatory system, and it's all because they want to make the world into a global empire and take over the world. And Africa isn't the only target. Recently, it's been observed that China has also adapted and is using similar tactics. Wake up, Africa. no one is truly your friend. Everyone else only sees you as the end to their means. After the United States and the Belgium had used Joseph Mobutu to assassinate Patrice Lumumba in 1961, the United States sponsored and helped Joseph Mobutu into political power. And that was not all. The United States backed and protected Joseph Mobutu to be president for over 3 decades, and even sang his praises, even though Joseph Mobutu stole over $4 billion from his country, the Congo. Of course they liked him, because unlike Lumumba, Mobutu was a very easy and key essential for the West to keep looting his country's resources. So if you ask me, one of the major reasons why Africa is still impoverished today is because most of its leaders have the same character as Joseph Mobutu. Out of greed, they use the same power given to them by their people to rob the nation's wealth. And on top of that, they allow themselves to be easily manipulated by the West, which makes it possible for the West to keep looting our natural resources. In every 4 years, as soon as these politicians are sworn into office, they budget and approve for hundreds of brand new SUVs, which cost about $250,000 for each. These monies could be used to create jobs for the youth, but no. They would rather raise their standards to look like their Western masters. They award themselves with expensive new houses, huge salaries and bonuses, expensive trips and many more, at the expense of the taxpayers' monies.
Moving on to Equatorial Guinea, Mr. President has announced that his son is now the vice president. Between 2011 and 2014, this same guy spent $315 million on properties and luxurious goods. And don't forget about his £100 million mansion in Paris that was seized by the French government.
They take huge loans in the name of building national projects, but in most cases, the monies disappear, no projects are seen, and no proper accountabilities are given. In the end, the citizens pay off the debt through tax increments. Let's call a spade and not a big spoon. Most of the African politicians are just visionless thieves. The founder and first president of Ghana, Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, suggested in his book, Neocolonialism, that Africa could be placed among the most modernized continents if Africa's resources were used in her own development instead of being so cheap in their raw state. And he also saw that this would either be very difficult or impossible to achieve unless Africa united. The unity would make Africa strong both militarily and economically. And with the unity, Africa could fight off outside exploiters. But unfortunately, he was overthrown even before he could achieve the dream of uniting Africa. Ex-president of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, was leading other African leaders into unity and was determined to bring into existence Africa's first central bank, which was going to create one currency for Africa, the gold dinar, and back the currency with gold. This would have made the African currency the strongest in the world, forcing the rest of the world to buy Africa's resources in gold. This would have made Africa lead the rest of the world and would free Africa of neocolonialism. For this reason alone, Gaddafi was assassinated.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
One would think that the rest of the African leaders would have come together to continue from where Gaddafi left off. But no, it's either they don't have the balls or they are just power hungry and they all want to be president of starving people, rather than choosing one president of one powerful nation. So yes, one of Africa's biggest problems we have is the greedy people we have in our leadership positions who are willing to sell Africa out only to enrich themselves. And until we learn to see better and act different, we will keep changing political parties, but Africa will still remain impoverished because we will only be changing different fruits, but of the same tree. A wise man once said, "What a man does not know, he does not confront, and what he does not confront, he does not conquer." You see, my friend, the African education system was designed by the European colonizers, and it was designed to program the Africans to become obedient employees, totally dependent on them, and definitely not independent problem solvers. And the interesting part is, even up till now, over 90% of Africans do not have a single idea of what is going on. And so the question still remains, how do we even correct what we have no idea of? Unfortunately, when Africans gained independence, the leaders inherited the colonized school system alongside. Until now, no significant changes have been made. The general purpose of education is to train or program students to develop the skills of solving problems on their own. So students are best trained if they are trained with a method of identifying and understanding a problem and then reasoning to find a solution for the problem they have identified, with the teacher showing the process in practical form. But typically, an African child is trained with a method of memorizing answers only to pass tests, and the child doesn't even have to understand the problem or how the answer came about. They just need to get the answer right. Plus, over 90% of the education is done in theories with very little done in practicals. All this makes real-life problem solving either very difficult or impossible. So we see lots and lots of educated people with very good grades but can't solve any problems in the society. Many would think that Africa, with its vast natural resources, would have countless schools that teach Africans what the natural resources are, how to mine them, what they are used for, and how to process them from their raw states into finished usable products. But no, it's quite the opposite. Countries that do not have the kind of resources we have rather train their citizens on how to identify our resources, how to mine them and process them, while African students are being educated to memorize how to draw and label insects, how many times religious people pray, the life cycle of mosquitoes, and many other nonsense that do not solve no problems in the society. And we still get surprised when other countries buy our raw materials cheap, process them and sell them back to us expensive. And it is not a surprise that many of Africa's top private problem-solving companies are owned by foreign entities, while Africans move around with their certificates begging for jobs. The African school system doesn't teach nationalism. Students are programmed to love everything European and less appreciate everything African. This is so bad that students even get punished for speaking their own native language in class, but praised for fluently speaking a Western language. In our schools, we are trained to dress like Europeans, talk like Europeans, sing like Europeans, pray like Europeans, taught stories and heroes of Europeans, taught to learn and love cultures and beliefs of Europeans, while we are programmed to believe and accept that every one of our African cultures and beliefs are either useless or demonic. It is said that a people who do not learn from their history is doomed to repeat the mistakes of their fathers. And yet, our schools do not teach us our history. And even if the history is ever taught, it is highly distorted. If a people is completely stripped of their language, history, heritage, and culture, that they do not know even who they are, then the question is, what inspiration or patriotism do they have to fight to right the wrongs that have been done to them for centuries? Someone said this, and I think it was Aristotle, that give me a child until he's 7 and I'll show you the man. You see, research and time have proven over and over again that if you want someone or a group of people to behave in a certain way, program them or train them in that particular way when they are young, and it will be very difficult, if not impossible, for them to depart from it when they grow old. As humans, we are all being programmed or trained or educated, but you see, this mostly happens when we are young in our schools. And if education truly determines how our future turn out to be, then until we change our education system from solely theories into practicals, from memorizing answers only to pass tests into critical thinking, from learning Western cultures into learning African nationalism, and from learning subjects that do not contribute to societal building into subjects that really do, Africa will continue to remain impoverished, because it is the individuals that make up Africa. And if we program the individuals only to become obedient employees, non-nationalists, and totally ignorant of how to use Africa's resources to develop Africa by themselves, then where is the future of Africa? If you've made it this far, congratulations. You see, some people through honor and duty have given their lives up for the sake of Africa, and it is our turn now. There is a great shift, and the time is now. Not the next 200 years, nor the next 100, nor 50, nor 10 years, nor even the next year. The golden time is now. It is time for us to learn the actual truth, to decolonize ourselves, and to be sharing the actual truth with others to decolonize them as well. I've done my part for giving you this information, and now it is your turn to also do your part by sharing this information. And if you really like this content, kindly show your support by giving it a thumbs up. And also, if you're interested in content on practical Africa liberation, then do follow this platform for more. Bye for now.